Bismillah. There's different strategies. People are using different strategies. The Amish checked out. So that's one strategy, and that's actually a permitted strategy. The Prophet ﷺ talked about fleeing from, in the latter days, to flee to places that were far away from all the tribulation. I mean, my own teacher, Marab al-Hajj, he fled a city, a small mud city without any electricity, into the deep desert, because he thought that there was too much fitna in that town. Now that town, when I went and visited, it was filled with awliya and the Quran, and it was amazing. Like, I'd never seen anything like it. He fled from it because it was filled with what he thought was fitna. And so I think if the pre-modern people could come and see what's happened, they would not believe their eyes. They just would not believe what's happened to humanity. So, but then on the other hand, we go through periods. If you look at Bilal ibn Sa'd al-Ash'ari, who was one of the great tabi'een, I think he died around 120. Bilal ibn Sa'd radiallahu anhu said in Kitab al-Zuhd, which Ibn Mubarak relates, Ibn Mubarak gives this tradition from al-Awza'i, who was one of the great Salihin and one of the great Imams. He was a Mujtahid Mutlaq from Syria who ended up in Lebanon. He says that Bilal ibn Sa'd said that at his time, he said, Zahidukum raghib, your Zahid is just desirous of the dunya. Wa'alimukum jahil, and your wa mujtahidukum muqassir, and your mujtahid has serious shortcomings. وَعَالِمُكُمْ jahil, and your scholar is ignorant. وَجَاهِلُكُمْ mukhtar, and your ignoramuses are deluded. So that was, this is a tabi'een talking about the tabi'een. So it's all relative in that way, right? And I mean, I was saying earlier, in some ways this is a very enlightened period, and there's a lot of good in this time. There's a lot of really troubling signs out there, but there are also a lot of very positive things. Like racism is genuinely much more attacked now than it has ever been in human history. And that was one of the Prophet ﷺ's dreams, was to see a civilization, a society that genuinely judged people on the content of their character. So that's one of the great aspects of modern society, is that people really do see racism as ignorant. Anybody educated, or most young people now in the West really view racism as something ignorant. That's not to say there aren't bigots and racists and white supremacists and skinheads. They're out there too. But a lot of people now are really opposed to racism, which is one of the tragedies of American civilization right now, is that in a time when people are genuinely trying to overcome racism, that the race issue is being given so much fuel right now to create race wars and separate people. For me, it's really tragic, because I think people, legally, they're generally trying to overcome discrimination. And certainly Canada is the same. Canada is amazing in terms of what the Canadians are trying to do. I know Australia is trying to do that as well. They're making big efforts. And that's affecting even the Muslim countries, because we have a different form of racism. We've never had the type of racism that Western societies had. But Muslims definitely have a tribalism. They also have, skin color is the externalization of a metaphysical reality. So it's just a mistake. It's a metaphysical mistake. Because white is a good thing. And people on Yom Al-Qiyamah come with whitened faces. And people that are evil come with blackened faces. And that's Quranic. That's not racist, it's Quranic. That's the language of the Quran. And so that metaphysical reality, unfortunately, is externalized, which is ridiculous because there's a lot of white people that have very dark faces and there's a lot of black people that have very light faces. And we've all witnessed that in our own experiences. So, I mean, just put Nelson Mandela up to Henry Kissinger. See the difference? So those are aspects. On the other hand, the environmental crisis is very real and very serious. And then the consumerism is horrible, and I think we should try as much as we can to fight that and be lights in the midst of a lot of this darkness. The Muslims, if we were doing our job, a lot of people would be recognizing Islam as a real solution to a lot of the troubles that are afflicting human beings. But we have become such a barrier to people seeing the beauty of Islam, because this is a beautiful religion, undeniably. I'm just so struck by aspects of this religion. I was just in Morocco, and I was in a taxi, and this taxi, somebody walked out onto the street, and the taxi had to move, and he honked, and we were going fairly slow, and the window was down, and it was a young man, he was probably in his early 20s, and he just looked at the taxi driver, put his hand on his heart, and said, "Ismah li ya akhuya," forgive me, my brother. And that's just an amazing thing to have in a culture where two complete strangers, and in the West, I just imagine one of them flipping the other off or going into a state of road rage, or it was just very beautiful for me to see that. And that's from a tarbiyah that existed in Moroccan civilization for centuries, which was a spiritual training that existed. And wherever that spiritual training took root in the Muslim Ummah, you see the remnants of it today, and it's really stunning to see it. The Turks have it, because this was such a deeply dyed spiritual civilization, and so they still have it. It's still there. And so I think Allah calls us to be shuhada, to be witnesses to human beings and to humanity. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Excuse me, but can you kindly repeat the author of the poem?
It's Ibn Nahwi al-Tiramsani. Ibn Nahwi al-Tiramsani. He died in the early 6th century, 513, I think.
Assalamu
alaikum.
You mentioned modern warfare has different from any other time in history. If a Muslim country does happen to end up being in a war where they're not just being invaded but actually two countries next to each other fighting, what alternative do they have than to use bombs which may lead to collateral damage?
I'm having a hard time understanding. Maybe hold it a little away.
So unfortunately, if a Muslim country ends up being in a war with another country which is right next to it.
Another Muslim country or?
No, non-Muslim country.
Non-Muslim.
Non-Muslim country. Is there really an alternative to collateral damage anymore with the technology that we have, the bombs or the poison weapons?
Well, I mean, that's why I'm totally against war. Like, I believe war is unethical now. And that we should just be against war as a species. Because historically, the vast majority of people killed in wars were combatants. And now about 90% of the casualties are civilians, many of those women and children. Most of the casualties in Syria are civilians. Many of them are children. So war is just unethical. And that's why we should be at the forefront. Our ummah, our community should be at the forefront of nuclear disarmament. We should be at the forefront. And if you want to be socially active, like I don't really like demonstrations and things like that, but the people that impress me most are the people that are actively working against the arms dealers and arms manufacturers. And the United States, we're one of the biggest producers of weapons on the planet and purveyors of weapons. And Martin Luther King said that America is one of the biggest purveyors of violence on the planet. So Iran has been a pretty nonviolent community for the last several hundred years. Iran really does not have, they were aggressed upon in the Iranian war. They have unfortunately supported proxy wars. So they supported Hezbollah in Lebanon and recently the Houthis in Yemen. But they're a relatively non-belligerent community. And Iranian people are not belligerent. I haven't found them belligerent by nature. I'm against aerial bombardment. To me, should be outlawed. Lady Di, before she was killed or died in that car accident, she was working to have landmines outlawed, which I think is a really important, worthwhile thing to do. And you can get things outlawed. If you have enough people do it, you can do it. So I'm just totally opposed to modern warfare. I really am. And people say, well, it happens. I'd rather die, to be honest with you, than participate in that. I really believe in that hadith. The Prophet said, be like the best of the two sons of Adam. Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, and Imam al-Baghawi mentions this in the verse where the son of Ibn Adam says he's not going to kill Qabil when he raised his hand. He said, I'm not going to fight back. Imam al-Baghawi says the first Sharia was nonviolence. That violence was a permission, but the actual first Sharia was nonviolence. And then he says that this was what Uthman ibn Affan chose to practice. And Uthman chose to be killed rather than to kill others. And he sent, Hassan and Hussein were there to guard him. He sent them home. He sent all the guards away. And he chose to just let them kill him rather than participate in the fitna. And Uthman is a rightly guided caliph by ijma' of the Sunni community. So that was his choice, to choose to be killed rather than to participate in a fitna. And that's how I feel personally. I'd rather take the madhab of Uthman. I mean, this dunya is just not worth that much to me, to kill people indiscriminately. I mean, what they're doing is just so wrong. On all sides, they're all wrong. A whole lot of them. There's no right people here. They're all wrong. And then Muslims are like asking for American intervention in Syria, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you think you can have it one way and not the other way? Just, America should stay out of these countries. Just stay out of it. That's what caused all the problems, is American intervention.
Assalamu alaikum. I was really interested to know more about what you said about Marxism. It amazes me that as an ideology, it's influenced so many nations, and millions of people in India, where I come from, are still motivated by Marxism. And many activists I've met who are genuinely compassionate and risk their lives are either consciously or subconsciously motivated through Marxism. So what is it that we lose, and what is it that we gain by seeing social change, political change through the lens of Marxism? And could you suggest any reading?
Well, those are all excellent points you just made. Marxism, is a philosophy based on envy. And so that's one of the central problems of Marxism, is the idea somehow that certain people should not be rich because it's unjust. All property is theft, right? Lenin's great tautology. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is it's a profoundly materialistic dogma. So, I mean, Marx did his PhD on the Greek materialists, which were all the philosophers that Socrates and Plato spent their lives refuting. And Western civilization took up that banner for a long time, the Platonic view as opposed to the materialistic view. So Marx revived Greek materialism. And then the other thing is that if you have a political worldview, and you look at everything through the lens of politics, then you inevitably, invariably have to fall into victim pathology and grievance methodology. So everything becomes, I'm a victim of oppression, I'm a victim of injustice, and then you have your grievances. And it's not to deny grievances, but if that's the lens that you're looking at, as opposed to a metaphysical lens, in which what am I meant to learn from this? How does this involve me? Am I doing anything to deserve this? So that's a completely different approach, where you actually look at yourself first, as opposed to always looking at the other. Because the methodology of Iblis is to blame the other, the methodology of Adam is to blame himself. And so one of the things that Muslims do now is they blame everything on colonialism, they blame everything on Israel, they blame everything on America, and they don't ask, have we done anything here? Like, what happened? Because the Muslims were on top of the world for a very long time. What happened? Oh, they got ahead of us with technology. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. We became corrupt. We became filled with despotism. Our women have been mistreated for a very long time. And that's so blatantly obvious for anybody that looks at the Muslim world. And I'm not by any stretch a feminist, but the treatment of Muslim women, the fact that they, in large numbers, have been kept in illiterate states for centuries. And then the idea, there's so many rights that they have never been given that were given to them over 1,000 years ago by our fuqaha. And they don't even know those rights because they're not educated in their religion. And even if they did know those rights, most of the men wouldn't even give them to them anyway. So that's just a reality. So that's one aspect, is just this patriarchal sickness that has been endemic in our society for a very long time. And anybody that studies the early seerah will see very clearly what the Prophet ﷺ was trying to achieve. It's very obvious what he was doing. The elevation of the status of women, the women's literacy, the fact that he gave 1 day a week just for the women. All right? That alone is amazing. Women's inheritance, all of those things. I have a book by Al-Kiki, a Moroccan scholar, that Ahmed Tawfiq edited and published, which Al-Kiki was an alim from the Rif in Morocco, in the countryside, in the mountainous region, and he wrote it to the ulama of Fez, demanding that they do something about the oppression of women and this is a couple hundred years ago. So one faqih in the mountains who probably had an amazing mother or something, I don't know. But why isn't there more of that material in our community? Why have the ulama been silent for so long about so many of the wrongs? Honor killings. The fact that so many, in Pakistan, people get away with murder, literally. They get away with murder, throwing acid on people because they refuse to marry them. Like, what is that? Where do people do things like that? I don't even have a frame of reference to wrap that around my head. And yet these things occur on a daily basis in the Muslim world. Genital mutilation. Like, what is that? And yes, it's a pharaonic culture. Yes, the Christians of Africa do it as well. And the honor killings occur in the Christian communities as well. The Hindus also have their honor killings. That's all true. But why do Muslims have that jahiliyyah? Like, why hasn't 1,400 years of guidance taken effect and eradicated these things from our community? Why? So there's a lot of problems that I don't think Muslims are courageous enough to face openly and confront. And that's where I have the biggest problem with these modern philosophies, is that they fail to look at why things happen at a metaphysical level. They look purely at the political level, and at the political level, you're trapped in a dialectic of grievances. And then another aspect, I'll give you an example. Historically, conquest is entitlement. Like, people are all angry at the Jews for taking over Palestine. I live in a country where we took over all that land. I live on a lonely land. And then if you say, well, we should give it back to the Indians, so then the Lakota that kicked off the Shoshone from Shoshone land, do we force the Lakota? Once you go into grievances, it's just, everybody's got the grievances, with the exception maybe of the Anglo-Saxons. They're the only ones. I don't know how they got away with that. Yeah. But even they have their oppressed groups. So, but that's the reality of it. So that's why I just think it's a very dangerous doctrine. We don't need Marxism to address wrongs. Our tradition has amazing ways of addressing wrongs. And Marxism, I think, has wreaked havoc on the Muslim mind. We're living in a Marxist world. Critical theory is completely inspired by Marxism. And critical theory, to me, is one of the most dangerous ideas that has enveloped the modern world. And many young Muslims are completely wrapped up in critical theory without even knowing what it is, what its sources are, and what it means. If you go on the Black Lives Matter website, look at what their objectives are. To get rid of patriarchal heteronormativity is one of their stated objectives. Heteronormativity. Right? That's a fancy word of saying getting rid of male-female dominant culture that looks at the male-female relationship as the dominant relationship in a culture, that men and women should marry. In other words, we don't want any of that. Now they're outlawing, there's just a school that they're not allowing them to call the girls girls. They have to use general neutral language. I think that was in Australia. Wasn't it? Amazing. This is all critical theory. It's the logical evolution of Marxist thought, where people will choose their gender in the future. They're already doing it. That gender will be seen as a fluid thing. It already is. This is all happening. And so we can all experiment. There's a continuum. You might feel more feminine. I think I'll wear a dress today. I'm feeling feminine. Tomorrow I'll wear some pants. Maybe the next day I won't wear anything because I'm feeling nativist or something like that. This is what's happening in the world. People are going mad. It's just a type of insanity. And a lot of this is because Iblis has provided the revelation. It's all demonically inspired. And people can laugh and say that I don't believe in the devil. There's more evidence for his existence, right, than a lot of other things that people debate about. I'm amazed that people don't believe in the devil. Just look at the world. There's a lot of proof. Allah yubarak fikum. So, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وفقنا الله وإياكم إن شاء الله. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sheikh Abdullah, he actually has a message. Did they send it? Okay, so you can see it's a very good message. I think he just summed up in a very short thing some really important things for all of us to be thinking about and working on. So,